And welcome back to the Hot Lap. I wanted to keep this as a separate video. There's a really interesting piece on planetf1.com which is predicting every next driver's move. And I wanted to talk about it together as we look at the headlines together, thanks to obviously Sam Cooper from planetf1.com. So let's get into it. Obviously, as you can see here, they have Alex Albon in the Ferrari seat, Lando Norris in the Red Bull, and Carlos Sainz in the McLaren. Out of the three, which do I think is the most likely? Which do you think? I think Albon to Ferrari is the most likely out of all of those changes. But we'll see what the article says, because I've not read it yet and I wanted to almost get like a live opinion. So the article starts with, we have dug out our crystal ball to predict which F1 drivers will move where in the future. It said they've taken all 10 teams and predicted the most likely candidate to be racing in their colours in the near future. From established stars to rookie picks, here's our predictions for every team's next driver. So it's not necessarily for next year, but it's next year and beyond. So Red Bull, they're predicting Daniel Ricciardo in 2024, Lando Norris in 2025. This is picking the next Red Bull driver, gives you one of two answers depending on how you see 2024 playing out. Now, as we know, Sergio Perez has pretty much come out and said, I am going to go for the championship, which sadly made a few people laugh. I was one that definitely raised an eyebrow. However, I have to admire his optimism. As I mentioned a few shows ago, look at Valtteri Bottas 2.0. He came out the first season, and on a track where Lewis Hamilton is quite strong, made Lewis Hamilton look like, well, very average, let's say. Unfortunately, he couldn't sustain that pace for the rest of the season, but he did look like a more genuine challenger than I think Sergio Perez has ever done. However, every year's a new year. The car may suit him more, and all it takes is a few DNFs or really unfortunate bad luck for Max Verstappen with Sergio Perez winning, and we can have a very, it could be a lot more interesting. Is it likely to happen? Probably not. A lot of people are suggesting that Sergio Perez in 2024 is not, it's going to be more of the same, and by the end of the year, Daniel Ricciardo will have replaced him. I think that's the most likely scenario. Now, Lando Norris to Red Bull in 2025 is an interesting one. We all know, kind of like, toward the end of the summer, there was a lot of talk on Red Bull wanting Lando Norris in their car as soon as possible. However, and there's a big but here, I think that whether Lando Norris goes to Red Bull or not depends on what McLaren are going to do and how good McLaren are and how they manage the Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris situation. Because if McLaren are going to continue to improve, there's an argument that they are the second fastest team at the moment. They have, fairly okay strategy, let's be fair, compared to Mercedes and Ferrari, and also pretty much the second fastest car. And at times it could potentially, at times it looked as though it could challenge that Red Bull. Now, Lando Norris going into the Red Bull team, he's going to be immediately at a disadvantage. It's very much Max Verstappen's team, and he's going to have to overcome that if he wants a chance of winning that championship. However, he's very much seen as the number one at the moment in the McLaren team. Now, a lot is going to be made of Oscar Piastri next year. It's no longer his rookie year. Second years are said to sometimes be harder than the first, because you've always got, he's a rookie, he's learning. You don't really have the same excuse, I think, next year. However, Oscar Piastri has proved pretty much unflappable, but it's his races where his big weakness is at the moment. So that's going to be really interesting. But I don't think Lando will go to Red Bull. It says, say Sergio Perez continues in the mixed form we saw in 23, it would come as no surprise to see Red Bull pull the trigger. But it says, provided he does adequately, and they're talking about Danny Ricciardo, would then be the most obvious candidate. And they said that Lando Norris to Red Bull rumours are nothing new, and despite denials from both parties, there's enough smoke to suggest there is fire. The 24-year-old's contract runs out at McLaren at the end of 2025, just in time for those new rules. And should McLaren not be challenging next season, then he may be tempted. McLaren may to opt to cut their losses and get some kind of remuneration rather than losing their star man for free. So Mercedes, a pretty obvious one here. Andrea Kimi Antonelli, he's seen as the next superstar. And it says here, the next driver in at Mercedes is likely to have the daunting task of replacing Lewis Hamilton. I think that's a lot more likely than Lando to Red Bull, which are some of the biggest shoes in F1 history to fill. Now, with George Russell, the perceived youth in the team, the Silver Arrows may look for an already established star to lead them. But then the question is, who is that going to be? The question, Charles Leclerc would be the obvious name. However, there's a lot of reports coming out that he's going to re-sign put his faith in the Ferrari. I mean, Ferrari have pretty much put Fred Vasseur there. A lot of people have suggested to appease Charles Leclerc. And hopefully, you know, for him it does. It says Norris would be another candidate, but if he does leave, it looks likely that Red Bull is going to be a stage, it says. So if there's no obvious choice, why not be bold? Kimi Antonelli is a highly thought of prospect, having won the FRECA Championship and faces a big challenge for 2024 as he bypasses Formula 3, going straight to F2. Now, as we know, Hamilton won the equivalent of F2, GP2. Rosberg won the equivalent of F2. It was called GP2 then. Leclerc has won it. George Russell himself has won it as well. So there's a lot of pressure on Kimi. It's going to be really interesting. This F2 season, it's going to be really, really interesting. And say, for example, if Hamilton signs even longer than 2026, is it going to be George Russell that may be given the shaft of Mercedes? I don't think he will, to be fair. I think George Russell is a lot better than his 2023 season, than he showed in his 2023 season. So hopefully he sorts it out. But I do think Kimi Antonelli will be in the wings, potentially replacing Lewis Hamilton in 2 or 3 years, should Lewis retire in 2 or 3 years. Now, the most obvious one for me, they go, is Ferrari, Alex Albon. And it says, with rumours that Charles Leclerc is set to commit his long-term future to Ferrari, the next driver is going to be Carlos Sainz. Will he be going? There's talk about negotiations with Carlos Sainz. However, these negotiations, the rumour is he wants a 2-year deal, Ferrari want a 1-year deal, and whether they come to some compromise or not. And the interesting thing is, we had a video about Charles. How good is Charles Leclerc? He was really good in 2022 compared to Sainz. However, this year they were very, very close to each other. Although Charles Leclerc did have the worst luck out the two. And this is reports suggest, here we go, Ferrari unwilling to give Sainz that 2-year deal. He is after, so clearly they are looking at the 25 driver market. The Ferrari duo are 2 of the 14 drivers currently out of contract at the end of next season, but a name that has been linked of late is Alex Albon, it says. After a tumultuous time at Red Bull, Albon has rebuilt his reputation at Williams and emerged as one of the best drivers on the grid. The only issue with Alex Albon, I don't really want to say an issue, playing devil's advocate, so to speak, is when you look at his teammates, they haven't been that good. They've been no Max Verstappen, for example. However, I do think that Williams wasn't as good, and Alex wasn't as good as we saw with Logan Sargent and Latifi. That didn't exactly elevate either of them, did it? And I do feel that Alex Albon did outperform the car a lot of the time. However, the fact that we don't have no established star or a rookie we know is really, really solid next to him, it's really, really hard to judge that performance. But there are rumours that Albon will go to Ferrari, and he could be a really, really good teammate to Charles Leclerc, I think, as well. McLaren, it says here, Carlos Sainz, and that's obviously dependent on Lando Norris going to Red Bull. And it says, with Oscar Piastri tied down until 26, this driver would more likely replace Lando Norris. The Woking outfit are in a similar boat, where they'll be looking for an experienced driver, and while they have a healthy academy, there's no standout star at the moment. And they said, so how about the return of a former driver, with Ferrari unwilling to give Sainz more than a 1-year deal? Could he be tempted to go back to McLaren? They've admitted that this depends on Lando Norris, though obviously leaving. So, Aston Martin, I guess this kind of makes a lot of sense, really, but even more so, I think, of than any other actually looking at it. They put Felipe Dragovic. Now, with Lance Stroll presumably sticking around for the foreseeable future, the next driver in at Aston Martin will most likely be Fernando Alonso's replacement. However, if you are a serious team, as Aston Martin want to be, you would replace Dragovic with Lance Stroll now. I'm so sorry, Lance, but you would. Surely, to go alongside Fernando. But it says, if Aston prove to have another one of the quickest cars in the grid, they may be able, it says, to tempt one of the better drivers away from their established setup. But to do that would be to ignore a talent waiting in their wings. Dragovic has been patient. He's the winner of the 2022 F2 title and was the reserve driver and nearly got his calling in testing, but nearly got his calling during that first race in a car. But Lance Stroll came back, and to be fair, what a hero Lance Stroll was at that first race. And onwards, working with what must have been quite a lot of pain in his hand. So Aston have made it clear they want to keep Alonso beyond the end of the year, but if he does leave at the end of 24, Dragovic seems to be the obvious choice. Really, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be a hater, but their 2024 driver lineup should be Alonso, Dragovic. Sorry. Alpine. Okay, Jack Doohan, it says here. Now, of all the teams on the grid, the pair This pair looks like one of the most solid for the future, with both drivers in their late 20s. The pair is both contracted until the end of 24, but barring any major catastrophe, they are good money to be extended. I'm assuming they're obviously talking about Ocon and Gasly. Alpine, though, could be another team to put their faith in their academy driver, and that's Jack Doohan. He's impressed in the last year's, 2023's F2 Championship. He finished third, and if he were to bet that, he would put himself in contention for that seat. So there we go. Now, Williams, this is an interesting one. This is obviously dependent on Alex Albon leaving. But then if Williams, you can't help but think, if next year Williams show a massive upheaval in form, would Alex Albon want to leave? I guess the lure Ferrari will probably, if they offered him that seat, be too much. But it has here Liam Lawson in 24 or Luke Browning in the future, which is interesting because a lot of people think Liam Lawson is going to go to the AlphaTauri team. But it says Williams were the last to confirm their lineup, Logan Sargent. So, however, if he does not improve, Williams may choose to cut their losses, which would then make Liam Lawson an ideal candidate on loan from Red Bull. But I can't think that why would Williams want another? They wouldn't want another driver on loan. Kind of George Russell was on loan, did a really good job for them. But it says, but Williams, here we go, have been keen not to develop other drivers, so it does not reach the end. If he does not reach the end of the season, and Sargent has done enough, then it might has not done enough. Then it might open the door for someone like Williams Academy, Luke Browning. So if Sargent is going to stay, they need like an established star. I'm struggling. I'm kind of like Lance Stroll. Logan Sargent, I don't think gave us enough reasons for him to have a 2024 seat, and I can't help but wonder that if Williams had an exciting rookie in their seat, surely he would have been the one to go to the Williams team instead of Logan Sargent, which is why they left it so long. I know they were giving him a chance, but if they had absolute faith in him, then they would have signed him a lot sooner, wouldn't they? In my opinion. AlphaTauri, it says Liam Lawson. This is one of the most obvious ones as well. An easy one with Liam, but all but certain to be the next driver in the seat. The only question is when. Now, as we know, Sergio Perez is going to be the master potentially of when. If he does absolutely shocking next year in that Red Bull, Ricciardo moves up, then it's open season for Liam Lawson, isn't it? But it does say that Lawson will likely be the seat for 2025. Now, Sauber, a la the old Alfa Romeo team, aka the new Audi F1 team from 2026. And it says, Theo Pourchaire, this is a move that, if reports are to be believed, came very close to happening for next year. Now, having won the F2 Championship, the Sauber Academy driver has been itching for an F1 seat, and with Zhao Guanyu hardly pulling up trees since his arrival, he's rumoured to be on his way out. I mean, you have to wonder, the cynic may say, because there's a Chinese Grand Prix next year, is that the reason why Zhao has saved his seat for 2024? Cynic could say yes. Having said that, it would be really nice for Zhao to get his home race, for the fans to cheer him on, and hopefully the Sauber team, former Alfa Romeo, have a really good car. I mean, that would be ideal, and he sorts himself out, gets on the podium in a crazy wet race, who knows. But Zhao, he says he's kept his seat for 24 with Pourchaire off to Super Formula, but don't be surprised to see this move take place at the end of the year. Now, Haas, we've got Oliver Behrman, and as we saw with Daniel Ricciardo in 2022, attracting drivers to Haas can be a difficult task at times. Ricciardo allegedly was offered for a seat for this year, 23, from Haas, but he was like, no, thank you. Now, for this reason, it makes them one of the harder teams to predict, but they've been known to give driving time to the young candidates in Ferrari's academy, and maybe Ferrari will sweeten the deal there. But there we go. I mean, I think that's quite interesting. Will they be right? I'd like to think maybe in like a year or two's time we'll come back to this video and see whether we were correct in the predictions. But anyway, thank you very much. If you've made it to the end, you are a champion. If you like, subscribe, made it to the end, do any of those two, you are a multiple world champion. This has been the Hot Lap. Thank you so much. If you want to subscribe, that would be absolutely amazing. We're getting up there. I reply to your comments all the time. I do, but it's only a matter of sometimes I'm a bit busy, but I try and get to all your comments. Thank you so much. I'm mumbling now, so I'll leave you to it. Thank you.